Good evening, everyone, and welcome. I would like now to call, we have a lot of children here, that's fantastic. I would now like to call the City Council study session for August 29th, 2023 to order. As a reminder, the city's YouTube channel is where you can watch the streamlined vision, the stream of this meeting, and also at longmountainpublicmedia.org/watch or on Comcast channels 8 or 880. Can I have a roll call, please?
Mayor Peck,
Here.
Council Members Hidalgo Faring,
Here.
Martin,
Here.
McCoy,
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez,
Here.
Councilmember Waters, Councilmember Yarbrough.
Here.
Mayor, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Let's stand for the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I love all those little voices in the background. It's great. It's great. Anyone wishing to speak at first call, public invited to be heard, will need to add his or her name to the list outside the council chambers, and only those on the list will be invited to speak at the first call, public invited to be heard. And remember, it is for residents only and city employees at first call. Anyone else can talk at second call, public invited to be heard, or at any of the matters that have a public hearing. Each speaker is limited to 3 minutes. We would like your name and address. Do we have any motions to direct the city manager to add agenda items to future agendas? Seeing none, I am going to change the agenda up a little bit. And because we have some incredibly young guests here, we're going to read the proclamation designating September 4th through the 9th, 2023 as Longmont Museum Discovery Days Week in Longmont, Colorado. Whereas the Longmont Museum's Discovery Days is an early childhood education program that encourages children ages 2 to 6 and their parents or caregivers to engage together in educational, hands-on art, music, and movement activities. And whereas when caregivers attend Discovery Days with their children, they help them cultivate important school readiness skills such as language development, attention, concentration, fine motor skills, emotional regulation, and play and social abilities. And whereas Discovery Days also help grown-ups learn skills to support their little ones' development as they observe, interact, make social connections, and consult with classroom teachers. And whereas the program is offered as a no registration needed class 5 days a week with 3 sessions per day. And whereas the Longmont Museum has added sessions on Saturdays to better serve families who are working during the week, an important effort toward equity. And whereas early childhood care and education is primary council priority, helping ensure that families with children under age 5 receive appropriate, affordable, and high-quality care and education. Now, therefore, I, Joan Peck, Mayor, by virtue of the authority vested in me in the City Council of the City of Longmont, do hereby proclaim September 4th through the 9th, 2023 as Longmont Museum Discovery Days Week in Longmont, and invite all citizens in the community to explore this resource for early childhood education with the young people in their lives. It looks like we have a ton of young people in our lives. Does anyone want to speak to this proclamation before we have a picture? Okay, great. Just see her pencil.
Hi, I'm Lee Putman, Discovery Days Program Leader at the Longmont Museum, and I would like to start by expressing my gratitude in the City Council and Mayor Peck for recognizing Discovery Days as a program that is making positive impact in our community. Tonight, some of our regularly attending Discovery Days families are here to celebrate and show their support for Discovery Days, so thanks so much for coming. Discovery Days is an early childhood education program for children ages 2 to 6 with their parents and caregiver. And we offer Discovery Days 5 days a week, 3 sessions per day. And each week of Discovery Days has a theme. At Music and Movement, families can dance, sing, wiggle, and they're all guided by music and dance instructors. In art classes, families are welcomed into the classroom with themed crafting stations, an easel to paint on, toys to play with, and sometimes puppets, and a very popular sensory table filled with all sorts of variety of touchable items that children can play and explore. In the art classes, children get to learn how to use their hands and their creativity by squeezing lines and blobs of glue, especially between paper and calling them glue quesadillas. Holding paintbrushes and sponges and stamps to mix and make big colorful messes, or sometimes mixing them all together just to make brown, which is also fun. And how to hold and use scissors, which is a really challenging multi-step skill for children, and they get to make all kinds of confetti with tiny little snips. Crafting stations have instructions and examples that we created to give families a starting point, but a lot of families choose to go off the script and make something completely different with the materials, and that's great too. At Discovery Days, parents and caregivers have a unique opportunity to observe their children as they're learning and interacting, and this gives the parents and caregivers a deeper insight to how the mind of their child works, learns, and is growing. By figuring out the learning style of their children early in life, parents and caregivers can have a more direct impact on their child's education as they grow. We've seen children grow up through our programming, attending Discovery Days, and then summer camps, and then acting as teen volunteers, enjoying the exhibits, of course, and even being hired on in a support role within the museum. Some grandparents even come to Discovery Days and tell me that they used to bring their children, and now those children are grown up and they're bringing their grandchildren. So Discovery Days has the opportunity to cross generations. Watching and supporting these families as they have grown and matured is a gift to us at the museum. Over the past few years, we have been expanding our programming in various ways, including adding Discovery Days music and movement classes, and launching the Equitable Access Program, which offers scholarship support from the Dodge Family Fund and the Stewart Family Foundation. We do our best to keep our fees for attending Discovery Days affordable. Classes are $225 per person for museum members and $250 per person for non-museum members. Discovery Days fall season begins next week at the Longmont Museum with our new additions. And this year we're delighted to offer Discovery Days art classes on Saturdays to make the program available to all those families who work during the week. Thank you so much for recognizing Discovery Days' importance in the community, and we hope to see everyone at the museum.
Do you want a picture? I see that some of the children have things that they've made. Do they want to hold those up while we do the picture? Okay. Thank you. That was a great, fun way to open up the meeting. We are now at the public invited to be heard portion of our agenda, and I want to remind you that 3 minutes, and please state your name and address. The first person on the list is Stanley Toll.
That was kind of a challenge because I'm recovering from the flu that got into my ears, so I have no balance.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, I'm Stan Toll on 2001 Terry Street. The reason I wanted to bring to your attention that Forbes has evaluated several different zoning reforms that have taken place in the country. And what they're finding is not only that has it increased housing, it has also increased city finances where most of this zoning reform has taken place. So what I'm advocating for is that the zoning reforms are not something that are usually, there are certain people that very much oppose the type of reforms that are needed. And it needs to be put on a ballot for the whole community to make decisions. And what I'm suggesting is that, similar to what Fort Collins tried to enact, and then all the council people got voted out because of the special interests, that the reforms that are needed be put on the ballot and for the whole community to debate and enact. And the thing that I want to point out is almost all the information that's out there, that the reforms that are needed not only increase housing, they increase the well-being of the finances and the livabilities of the communities that are doing these reforms. And I, again, encourage this city council to put together stuff, be put on the ballot for people in the community to think about and actually agree to. And since the whole community is doing it, then fingers can get pointed at that person caused that problem and all sorts of other stuff that like happened in Fort Collins. Thank you.
Thank you, Stan. Teresa McPhail.
Good evening, everyone. My name's Teresa McPhail. I live at 805 Macon Court. I'm here this evening to speak to you all about the Longmont Humane Society. Our city needs LHS now more than ever. My husband and I have adopted 3 cats through Longmont Humane Society, rescued 1 dog, narrowly escaped adopting a hedgehog, and through our business Max Place, we've donated many times to the causes that are so special at Longmont Humane Society. In 2019, I became a member of the board of directors, and we are charged with promoting LHS to the community. In 2013, some of us will recall the flood. LHS rescued hundreds of beloved cats and dogs for residents. Most often, they were held until the owners came and could collect them. We fed them, we walked them, we made sure that they were taken care of, and no bill was sent to anyone. Late December of 2021, the Marshall Fire broke out. We opened our doors to misplaced animals of all kinds. We offered free pet boarding, food, supplies, as well as helped finding a pet. No bill was sent again to anyone. In February of 2014, we lost our own dog, Mac. We called LHS, and they helped us find him. Hilarious story, but it would make me go over my 3 minutes, so I won't indulge you. My point is this: Longmont needs the Longmont Humane Society. Longmont and all of our 100,000 citizens we have needed them in the past, we need them now, and we need them 50 years from now. So I would ask that you come to the negotiating table with a fair and equitable solution to allow us to continue to support the city we've called home for 50 years.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Teresa. Strider Benston.
Thank you. Strider Benston, 951 West 17th. Boy, I learned about that meeting when I came this afternoon. I saw it on the door. And it's like, I mean, that was a great, interchange. And I wish I'd have made it on time, but life gets tough. And similar to that, and the thing I gave you last week, a different chapter in this book is about the meeting with James Baldwin and Bobby Kennedy, with Harry Belafonte kind of pulling it together. And Bobby Kennedy got extremely angry and screaming and stomped out after about 5 hours. And that the dialogue and the movement in Birmingham woke up Bobby over the period of about a month, and it changed his whole life. I even thought that it was John that woke up first, and after he was killed, that Bobby woke up, but Bobby was actually pushing to have a civil rights bill in 1963. But it's really, I mean, the thing about dialogue, and here's the book, Michael Eric Dyson's book. This whole book is about that meeting. Lena Horne was in it, and Lorraine Hansberry, and other people. And I spoke last week kind of about Little Rock. They're starting all over again to abolish education and abolish history. And that's exactly how Hitler took over Germany. People don't know that because not many people read history, but he went back 70 years to bring up the philosophy of the rule against the urban, of dogmatism against any democratic forms, even turn the people against Bismarck. I mean, that is the game that's going on right now. And the best book I have seen about it is Miles Taylor, called Blowback. And he was on the inside. He was John Kelly's chief of staff, and tried to keep a lid on the Nazification of the government when Trump was president. If he gets back, there's no country left. So let's believe in democracy and dialogue and people appreciating and getting to know and respect each other, because that is being thrown off the table. The whole gun culture is planning to have a civil war. Let's wake up, and thank you.
Thank you, Strider. Georgetta Johnston.
Good evening, I'm Georgetta Johnston from 320 Homestead Parkway, apartment 202 Longmont. So, thank you very much for letting me talk, Mayor and Councilman. I came for a good city tonight. I received the Times call. I seen somebody in there starting to act like that we don't need these things on the ballot, so it brought me tonight, because I'm really troubled. We do need our ice skating thing for the young people. Not this so much breweries and marijuana. What do we want for people, the older ones? Arts and Entertainment Center, some way, somehow, this needs to be worked out, because I went to the Longmont Chorale, the orchestra, different places, and they have to use the the high schools and different places in Bag. That's not fair. The senior center is a good place too. You know, I've lived here 70-some years, which I don't want to say. I don't mind because I'm growing older and precious. But we need a good city. And the only way we're going to do it is everybody working together. And I took my great-grandchildren to the Discovery Days. So I walked a lot of roads. So, Lord bless you people to work together. And I've had people come and catch me in Walmart, my doctor's office, different ones telling me they liked what I said. When I said, why don't you go talk? They like all the ideas, but one person can't do it all. So I'm praying and believing that you all want a good city because we need all this for all the people. It's good things. Not so many breweries, not so many marijuana, and any old way goes with our young people and different things in this city. So Lord bless you. I hope you're here, and I hope other people are here. And in this city, it's 100,000. Better shopping. We don't want to send our town people out to other places to use their money when that's what supports us. Affordable housing, of course, and fairness, all kinds of things. Lord bless you, precious people, and thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Georgetta.
You're welcome.
Lance Whitaker?
Lance Whitaker, 1750 Collier Street, Longmont, Colorado. I've been a long-time resident, 40 years now plus. And Georgetta, you'd be happy to see the plans for the sugar mill. You're sort of going to get your ice skating rink. I'm here today to tell you guys all that today is National Lemon Juice Day, Chop Suey Day, and Day Against Nuclear Tests. Thank you all, and you know what bill I support, HB 190-12300. Have a good day, y'all.
Thank you, Lance. And Diane Christ.
Hello, I'm Diane Christ, and I'm 2034 Mount Sneffels Street. I'm a candidate for the Ward 1 City Council seat and also on the Transportation Advisory Board. Although I'm here just as a citizen, those two things are informing my comments today. We're going to talk about the budget today, which I, for one, am excited about. And one of the things I want to talk about is that it seems like we have a lot of the right pieces in place within the town, but maybe they're just not working together yet. And one of the things, as I've been talking within my ward, is that the northeast side of town is starting to feel a little disconnected and isolated, actually, from some of the city services. It seems like, just to hear what some of the other commentators have said, that we need to work a little bit on the structure and fabric of our neighborhoods, just to develop what it is that we're looking for in our city and within our neighborhoods. So as we're going through the budget, maybe just rather than look at them as line items, we could look at how these things all interact with each other and come up with an integrated solution and an integrated budget. So those are my comments for today. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane. That was the last person on the list, so I am going to close first call public invited to be heard. Let's see. So now, we did our special report at the beginning rather than now. So we're going on to our study session items. The first thing on our study session item is the adoption of the City of Longmont 2023-2024 City Council priorities. I'd welcome Sandy Cedar.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Peck and members of council. Sandy Cedar, Assistant City Manager. You may remember that we've kind of discussed these since the retreat, and we've been going back and forth trying to put in some metrics and some really important measures on your work plan priorities. So we have made a couple of changes since last time we talked to you, so I'm just going to highlight those, and then I'm hoping that you are comfortable and ready for approval of these priorities. As just a reminder, the City Council Work Plan Vision, this is what you all decided during your last retreat. You made some tweaks to this one. This is also posted on the city's webpage. The focus areas that we discussed, that you had prioritized as housing, transportation, and early care and education. Of course, those aren't the only things that are on this. It's also important to consider climate action and the way that the places and amenities, as well as the way that we do things with equity, safety, and sustainability, anchored, of course, by our core services. We talked a little bit about progress is process, right, as we continue to iterate these plans and move forward on implementation. Budget alignment and prioritization are key, and just happens that these are presentations on the same day. You're going to see exactly what we're talking about in the proposed budget when Harold does his presentation. These are the areas we just talked about for focus. Housing is number one. Nothing has changed on these slides since last time you saw this. This is the overall future state and roadmap for housing and the goals and strategies. None of those things have changed. It's in transportation that we had some changes based on feedback from the council. This roadmap we had listed as current and future. We just wanted to denote that this is actually kind of a point in time. This comes from the transportation roadmap that's part of the equity work, the sustainability work. And so we wanted to just delineate that that's what this is, because some of these things are done and some of these things have changed, and so it's not a real accurate roadmap from this point forward, but this was a point in time in the last plan that was adopted. Then in the transportation milestones and outcomes, we added a few pieces of detail, particularly around the transportation mobility plan, the Vision Zero action plan, and the microtransit and shared ride plan. By the time this got to you, some of those things were completed, so we've updated those things that say done. We've also been able to lay out some more layers of check-in with the city council. So for each of these major plans, there's a community involvement aspect, and then there's a check-in with council and boards before there's adoption. And I think the last version of this just said, start the plan, end the plan. So this gives some more layers for what that's going to look like specifically.
I'm going to jump. I think one of it is you can look at, if you look at the Vision Zero action plan, some of the more detail we put into this is we're going to obviously have to start with the budget that we're presenting to you all, and we need to fill some positions. But we look at the process and we look at phase one, which is neighborhood mitigation strategies, which is less dependent on interaction with some of the other state highways and collectors and thoroughfares. And then you see in the next quarter where we're going to start testing those strategies based on council's input and what we see. Then we're going to start working on the next phase. So we're going to be moving through the process, I think, based on some of the feedback that was unclear, and wanted you all to know that we're going to keep touching base with the council and implementing early, so we're learning through some of this.
Those are the major changes to the transportation milestones. Early care and education did not change, but of course is an important priority. This kind of gives that current and future state, the theory of change around this work, and those education milestones and outcomes. We also added a places and amenities section, basically because there are so many different facilities in which we're talking about with ballot issues, et cetera. This has not changed since the last time that you saw it, but had changed since the retreat. And that's the overview. Happy to answer specific questions. There's also folks, staff, who can also answer more detailed questions that you may have about the work plan. What we are looking for tonight is any changes, any final changes that you'd like to see, or adoption if not.
Excuse me, Councilor Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. I have two areas to question, one of which is specific and one of which is general, and I'm going to start with the general. I'd also like to thank you for clarifying the incremental tiered application of Vision Zero. I think that that's much more satisfactory and gets us enjoying the benefits of Vision Zero sooner than it otherwise would. Also gives the council more chance to be involved and the public more chance to be involved than the kind of waterfall implementation that was originally described. So my general question is, what does this actually do? Because, you know, we had this retreat in what, March, is that right? March? And, thank you. You always know those dates. It's gonna be, yeah. Anyway, so it's been many months since we had this discussion. And really, we discussed what we were led to discuss by the staff, and the preface to the whole thing was, don't lay a lot of stuff on us because we are at organizational capacity. And by the way, I agree, we are at organizational capacity. So nevertheless, I think that there are some policy changes that have been made since, and just barely since, honestly, that are important to me. And so what I want to understand is, if it's not in this document, does it fall off the policy priorities? Does it get prioritized down? Because, you know, the council passed other policies just as much as they passed these policies. So can you explain that?
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and jump in. I think when we put this document together, this was really based on what council was looking at and what was, you know, key focus areas. As you indicated, council still gives direction to staff to do other things. You can say, I direct the city manager to do this, or I want to bring this in. We're still going to work on those things. What this is really about is really that high-level goal, that focus that we're going to have as an organization. And I think if there's a tension point to say, does it fall off or does it not fall off, I think it's where you have items that have policy direction when it comes in conflict with these issues in terms of staffing and capacity. That's when we'll make the decision that this one may move a little bit faster. It does not mean that we're not going to do something else that council gives us policy direction on. It just may mean we have to slow it down a little bit because this is what we have to get done.
Okay. My specific question, as I'm sure the two of you at least can anticipate, is about the airport. Because honestly, that's sounding to me like something that would get put on a back burner, slowed down. But almost at the same time as the retreat, to the extent that I actually can't remember whether it was before or after, the council did unanimously pass a sustainable aviation resolution, which is, I don't know why that's hard for me to say, but it is. And the interesting thing about that is that some opportunities that I'm not going to discuss at length have arisen since then. And, you know, the airport is both in the sustainability box and in the transportation box. And the one example of a real revolutionary thing that's easy for us to handle is there's such a thing as unleaded aviation gas now. And we don't sell it at our airport. But if the airport is on the back burner, we're going to miss out on some of that stuff that is really important to the general policies of the council. So that's why I'm questioning how this document is going to be used.
So to answer specifically that question, you know, obviously council has identified sustainability and climate action as key components within your overall strategy. And when you have that confluence of issues, we need to focus on it because you have to see what opportunities are presented. And so in that case, that would be something that we would drive on based on what we're seeing as it's connected to the other goals and as we're looking at different things versus if you had something where it's, we want to make these widgets because it makes us better, it may not be that there's the alignment there, and that may be where we have to pull back. But there is alignment with the council goals when we look at climate action and sustainability.
Okay, thank you. I'll remember that.
Yeah.
So before I call on Counselor Waters, I just want to kind of piggyback on what Counselor Martin said. I did have coffee with Levi, the manager of the airport, and we discussed the unleaded fuel, we discussed all kinds of things. And I asked him if he would give a presentation in February or March of 2024, because they are in some FOP discussions, and I would like,
FBO.
yeah, that too. Acronyms, they're all over the place. So I think that would definitely help all of us know where we are, what's Levi's vision, and who's going to have the FPL. Thank you. Council Waters.
Thanks, Mayor Peck. Sandy, could you, in your PowerPoint presentation, could you go back to the housing milestones and outcomes? Right, yeah, right there. And I don't mean this as a gotcha, but I do need to be clear, if on this page, because it's hard for me to see where it would be, except maybe with one exception. During the retreat, when we talked about housing, we got to the end of the retreat under the heading of housing, and a question, I think Harold asked the question, what are the other directions we would give to staff? And we weren't voting, but I offered that we needed to go back to the question that's come up several times by members of the community on ordinances on ADUs and short-term rentals. And is there additional clarity we ought to bring? Are there some changes we ought to consider in the interest of trying to grow our housing stock? One of the proposals was to kind of shift how we thought about SDRs and ADUs in terms of what would be a primary residence. You remember that conversation. And the correspondence we'd had in the run-up. In fact, I think one of the residents there commented at the beginning of the retreat. Yeah, and that was one of the things on the list, right? But I'm not certain I see it here. It hasn't come back in any form. Not that it should have before we see this, but my concern is if it's not here, it needs to be. Because we said it then as part of if it's core work or not, but going forward. And I think it's an important question relative to what we're trying to accomplish with our housing initiative. So is it here? And if not, where should it show up?
Council, in that conversation, it was in the section of what ordinances do we need to look at and revise, and so that was at the end. And as part of that was, one of the conversations was as we have the time to do this. I think we're still a couple of planners short. And so that's really been a capacity issue that we've been dealing with as we have other work. But it is on the list as part of the ordinance revisions that we have taken from that. And that was a different section of this, but we can also send that to council where you can see it.
I'm not going to be around long enough to be monitoring.
Right.
If I was, I'd say, I'd like to, even if it's a footnote, it not to be lost, that I'd be captured here, both for us and for one or more residents who we promised would be part of this work going forward.
And if council wants us to, this is your plan, we can definitely put it on there.
Then I'm going to move that we at least make a footnote, make a reference somewhere, as in good faith reflection of the conversation we had, both input from the public in our conversation. It ought to show up here somewhere as a footnote or captured somewhere. Not to say it rises where it falls in terms of urgency, but it's not forgotten.
Yeah.
That's a motion.
Are you
I'll second.
Okay, do we have any discussion? Are you, okay. I was going to say when we did bring this up, and I mentioned it with Hawk, is that his last name? And that was when the governor came out with his Proposition 213, and we didn't know where that was going to fall with ADUs. That is coming back on the next, through this legislation. They're going to divide it up into three things. So even though I agree with you and I will vote for it, I just want us to be mindful that what we do, we have to pay really close attention to what the state is going to say about those ADUs as well. Just so we all know that. We may not be able to do what we want to do, or we may be able to expand it further, who knows? So, any more, Counselor?
I
Who are
think
we
we need
doing?
to vote on the motion.
Yeah, we're in the discussion part, so, Counselor Martin?
Yeah, I see under strategy number 4, build affordable ADUs DAC or stock plan. Maybe adding a couple of words to that box would be sufficient. It's close.
Well, I had circled that box.
Yeah.
Not knowing whether or not the city would go right there. And maybe that's where the but that's not what the intent was, clearly. So that may be where the footnote should be made, or at the bottom of the page. And I obviously,
Yeah.
the council will be real mindful of what the legislature does. I just think we ought not to lose this, since that's the process and the conversation we went through.
So can you say once more what that footnote is going to be? I'm a little confused now.
Well, I haven't written the footnote. It would be the footnote would be specifically to review our ordinances on auxiliary dwelling units and short-term rentals to determine what's the best approach for the city in the interest of housing stock, fairness, equity, right?
Okay. Counselor McCoy?
Thank you, Mayor Peck. I was going to say same thing, that strategy 4 would have been the logical place to put that footnote. And again, understanding that the governor may be chiming in on this, we might need to push it back a little bit just to hear what they have to say. So thank you again for bringing that up, Mayor and Councilmember Waters.
Okay, seeing nobody.
I have
Go ahead.
two other questions.
Oh,
I
okay.
didn't,
Okay.
hopefully it'll be quick.
Are these questions, or do we need to vote on this?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, let's vote, sorry.
Yeah, that's what
I thought I was going to lose the opportunity to continue.
You won't lose that opportunity. So, seeing no one else for discussion, let's vote.
I can get out of the screen. Thank you for waiting.
Sure. By the way, that motion was made by Counselor Water and seconded by Counselor Hidalgo Faring. The vote is in, and it carried unanimously. Counselor Waters, you have the floor.
Thank you. Related to, on the transportation page, and you don't need to go to the page, but I received recent correspondence from a constituent specifically with a proposal, with an idea that he thinks, and I think he's right, is aligned with Vision Zero, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure where it would fall in terms of the priorities. It's not something we've discussed. But I do think, again, this might be, well, maybe the question is this. Here's what I received as correspondence. And I think, council members will be interested in this. Somebody who has retrofitted a golf cart, right?
Oh, yeah.
With lithium batteries, taken out 12-volt batteries, put a solar collector on the top, and now has a golf cart that doesn't have to be charged, doesn't have to be recharged, can't go more than 25 miles an hour, consistent with the idea of quieting traffic, and is wondering, he wrote to me, and I shared this with Eugene, and Eugene gave me some feedback, that I don't think there's anything in the state that would prohibit this, other than you can't drive on state highways. These have to be licensed. There's a checklist, brakes and seat belts and those kinds of things. But the follow-on question was, is there anything in ordinances, or it would be embedded in Project Zero, Vision Zero, that would either encourage or prohibit that kind of proposal or development among entrepreneurs in Longmont who would like to be part of moving forward with Vision Zero?
As a product.
Yeah, as an initiative of some kind.
So I think you asked me the same question, and obviously understanding the state traffic code and how you get something licensed is going to be the key piece.
That's going to be on him and the state. Is there anything that we could be doing to signal to the community as part of Vision Zero? These are ideas we'd like to see people bringing forward.
I think that is the intent of Vision Zero. So one of the fundamental tenets as you move through Vision Zero is community engagement, because that is what creates the strategies that you use to eliminate traffic fatalities and significant injuries. in terms of how you look at your community. I think it's been referred to as, well, here's this approach. Every approach in every community is different. And so you actually will see in some of the budget recommendations where we're actually recommending staff to start that community engagement process. And that'll be the venue where those ideas need to come and be vetted in as part of the overall strategy.
So is the advice for people, this idea or others, do they approach Phil? Where would you want them to go?
So what we've done, and we'll need to figure some of the details out because that's part of the staffing issue that we're dealing with, but one of the things that we're going to do to approach this is utilizing the Center of Excellence model that I've talked about with council before, what we have done with the Housing Authority, Neighborhood Impact Team. We're going to do the same thing here. And part of that is creating that engagement section. And so I would say early on, probably Phil and Jim.
Okay.
And we will formalize that as we can continue building the team out.
So I'm not going to offer this as a motion. I'm going to suggest that the next council, or you might want to make the notes. If somebody looks at this schemata, right, and has an idea that is aligned with Vision Zero or other early childhood or other priorities, where do they go with it, other than writing to their city council member? Are there, to kind of expedite a process to learn even if it's possible? You don't want us interacting with those folks. You would like to be getting those ideas, I would think.
Yeah, and I think when I talked about the Center of Excellence, the model that we used for the Neighborhood Impact Team is we create very specific email identities and phone numbers for specific projects so folks can get that information in and we know what it's related to. I'm really envisioning the same model for Vision Zero, so you have that central collection point.
So I'll leave it at this. Maybe there's a suggestion for residents who have ideas to bring forward, where they go to do that. That's all.
Yeah, we need to do that.
My last maybe observation, more than a question, is as I look at this, you won't be surprised that the question comes back to me. What is it you can only get done in these areas because you have a council up here supporting it? You can do almost everything that's in this, whether we ever meet again or not. Well, you're going to shake your head no. There aren't a lot of new policy initiatives, right? There's a lot of following through on decisions we've already made, directions we've already set. But it seems to me if it's a council work plan, we ought to be really clear, what is it you really need from the 7 people sitting up here to get accomplished? That becomes the subset of this that becomes a council work plan on which we must collaborate together. We need to come alongside you, right? Because this is only going to get done because we're in it together. Most of what's here, you can get done if you never see us again, I think, other than approving budgets. So that's for what it's worth. It's a comment, but I'd be looking for that in future conversations.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I think council's asked that, I think the last time we had this conversation, and I think when we actually went over this presentation, is clarity, focus, and really staying the course on these issues. Because I think one of the challenges on any one of these is that, we've talked about this, we've talked about staff capacity, we've talked about disruptors that hit us that we have to deal with because they're core. I think, but staying focused on this, because one of the things I've seen in my career is when you lose that focus and you start dropping other things in, that just dilutes what we're able to do, and it just starts slowing everything down. And I think I've been consistent in saying if we can just stay focused on this, we can accomplish some great things.
So, I'm going to throw something else in, which you're not going to like. But when I go to the transportation thing, I totally am in support of everything we're doing in the timeline, et cetera. But what I don't see on here, and it's going to come back to us very, very fast, starting with the Transportation Summit tomorrow, is that we are focusing very heavily on rail. And that's what that summit's going to be about tomorrow. I don't see that in here anywhere. And there could be a vote next year on the Front Range Passenger Rail District, and working with, which is going to bring our Northwest Corridor train to Longmont. we need to have, if I'm not here, if we need to have this in the plan. And I look at it right here where it is, Q3 2024, conduct outreach and engage in information campaign, because that is one of our subsections of the board, that we have a whole outreach plan that we're working on, and it's going to come to us. We need to discuss as a city, as a council, how are we going to do this? And I don't think we can put it off. So it wasn't, when we did the retreat, it wasn't at the phase where it should be, but it is now. And we're moving fast. So where in this, do we need another column? Do we need?
So I think to your point, we talked about all of these issues in the retreat. This is an adjustment. It's your plan. If you want to add rail into this conversation, I think it would be the same approach that we took with the ADU STRs. And you can make a motion to augment this where we include rail as part of the plan. And then obviously I know Phil's been engaged in those conversations, so we can line that out. And it's as simple as that.
Okay. Then I move that we put rail into this plan. We augment it and add rail. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, let's vote. So I made the motion to augment the plan to include rail, and that was seconded by Councilor McCoy. That carries unanimously. Thank you.
I think we're looking for overall adoption of the plan.
You know, there was a part in there, let me go back to where it was, where we discussed codes. Was it in housing? I'm scrolling through really fast, but I remember when I was going through it at home, I saw that several codes and ordinances were brought up. Did anyone else see that? Well, I don't see it now.
Oh,
Did you see that?
that was the document that I referred to earlier where council listed ordinances that you all wanted to review. And that was in connection with, as we had time, we could deal with those other ordinances. And that was I think the section where the ADUs, STRs
Okay.
fell in.
Then I would like to add something to those ordinances as well to review, and it's the residential mixed use. The code. I want to discuss, and I think this is the area, I want to discuss the infill. The infill spaces in our city that allow or have the ability to allow urbanization apartments. Is that residential mixed use or is it MOU?
Sorry, Mayor, I think I may have found where you were looking in the housing section, because there is a section about continuing to review affordable housing, affordable incentives that encourage infill density height parking. Is that what you mean?
I think it is. Where is that?
It's under the housing milestones, under strategy 4, number 2.
Strategy 4.
Yeah, I popped it up on the screen too, so that you could see it.
Yes, that would be it.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I was like, I know, I saw that. I saw that too, yeah. Okay.
Okay. Do I need a motion for that, or is that just in
It's
there?
already in there.
It's
If you
already in there.
adopted, it's in there.
Great, thank you so much. So we need a motion, Counselor Martin.
Yes, so I move acceptance of this plan. As
So that-
amended.
As amended? Thank you. So the motion to accept and adopt the plan as amended was made by Counselor Martin, seconded by Counselor Waters. Let's vote. I don't see any discussion. They both came at the same time. I heard one in each ear.
Hey, where's my budget presentation?
Is that next budget? Not lost.
Did it that way.
Mayor, do you want to read that result of that vote?
Yes, that carries unanimously. Thank you, Don.
Screen, there you go. Okay.
Are you ready?
Always, for this.
Sorry, I lost my presentation. So, Mayor and Council, as prescribed by charter, we're here to, I think Jim and Teresa are going to come down to join me. We're required to provide you with the 2024 proposed budget. I will go through that. The charter requires that I provide you with the balanced budget no later than the last day of August, I believe it is. September 1st. So, here we are. They will provide you links with the budget. Tonight is going to be a rather abbreviated overview of the budget, and you all will have lots and lots and lots of information to review. Before we get started in this, one of the things that I want to start off with is really thanking Jim, Teresa, Sandra Cifuentes, and Sarah Del Valle. Sandra and Sarah are back there, if you can wave at the council. Yeah, there they are. They have really done a lot of work in this budget process. It has been one that has been perplexing as we've gone through this, just based on, it's just been different this year, and I'll talk through some of those issues. One of the things that we've talked about as we've looked at the budget, you all have over the last few budget years really been, I can remember probably the last three where we've had people coming forward talking about, how do we get more funding into the library? How do we get more funding into recreation centers? How do we get more pickleball courts? And when we talked about that, I thought it was important, and you all had me discuss this before in a previous session, is can you kind of give us some history in terms of what we've had to deal with in the budget, and how does that impact us today? So one of the things that, as we look to the future in the budget, that we have to talk about is really when you look at '08, for cities across the nation, that was a significant year for us because that was probably, in the Great Recession, the one thing that hit cities and the state and federal government at a level that we probably haven't seen since Black Friday. And what that really meant for a lot of cities is we had to make significant adjustments to our operations. When Longmont went through that process, and when I was brought in during the interview process, one of the things that caught my attention in the budget was we have this budget gap that we need to deal with. And what that really was related to was ongoing funds. Cuts were made, things were put back in, but we used one-time funds to really handle those issues. And from a financial strategy, that's really something that you have to correct because you want your budget in perpetuity, ongoing expenses to be covered with ongoing funds. So what that really did during that time frame was from 2012 to approximately 2015. Was that correct, Jim? Somewhere in that neighborhood, 2016. We really, every year, we're taking chunks out of the budget gap that we had in front of us. What that meant is that we actually, as we were in those budget years and we were addressing that reset, is that was new revenue that wasn't made available for expanding the organization and what we need to deal with. And so as we moved through that, then in 2013, we had flood recovery, kind of a point in time when we look at, we're at the 10-year anniversary. I think we literally presented the budget and had to come back the next meeting and said we have to completely change it. So obviously, we had to push funds around. During that time frame, we had the goal of creating $1 million ongoing, $1 million of ongoing revenue to create the Affordable Housing Fund, which we did. And we've been able to utilize that to create a number of projects. And then the Health and Human Service Fund, we took from 2.25% to 3%, which is roughly $850,000. We've also had years with limited new revenue. What you may remember is historically the cycle that we get into is reappraisal years you get revenue, non-reappraisal years is a tight budget cycle. And so we started really adjusting how we were approaching it. We weren't utilizing all the new revenue in the reappraisal year, so we could smooth out that curve and what we were having to deal with. And then in 2023, we started creating the Attainable Housing Fund. And recently, we all know inflation and compensation have really been significant pressure points. Well, what does that all mean related to the 2024 budget? You know, as I was going through the budget process this year, I believe it was Sandy that made the comment in budget reviews, we just now have certain departments in her area that are actually getting to pre-2008 staffing levels. And so when we look at where we've been moving as an organization, we've had to put funds in these areas to deal with these issues, but it also has really slowed down how we can deal with some of the new issues that are hitting us. And so I wanted to make that point today because there's been a lot of questions. In addition, when we look at some of our capital expenditures and what we've been able to do and what we haven't been able to do, is when you all talked about how can we add facilities, and we said we can't do it with the incremental budgets. It was also because we had a number of buildings where they were failing and we had to make adjustments. And so we had to use a public improvement fund and issue debt in order to repair the library, Safety and Justice Center, this building, of which you will see presentations on in terms of where we're sitting. So that just reduced what we had available to do. And I wanted to set that stage because I think it's important as we start looking at what we're recommending and funding in the future. I talked a little bit about the 2024 budget challenges, and you know, one of the most significant items that we had to deal with this year was really the revenue uncertainty. And that was interesting. We all know that we had the significant increases in property values, and we saw the conversation at the state level, and you know, we don't know what's going to happen. And I'll let Jim talk more in depth on the first two bullet points, but you know, when we look at HH, will it pass? If it passes, what's the impact? And so that really made us look at how much of the revenue do we actually allocate in the property tax, not knowing what's going to happen. In addition, inflation and high interest appears to have impacted use tax. You know, when we were heading into the budget process, I remember in May, June, Jim and I had a lot of conversations because our sales and use tax actually was below budgeted levels. And when we looked at that, it really was the use tax that was driving that. You know, thank goodness for hailstorms, because that made a difference. But I think what we're seeing in that use tax world is, you know, two of the most important factors is really, are businesses investing? Are we building? You know, are they replacing equipment? And so when you get into periods of high inflation and high interest, it really kind of starts stifling that. So that was a concern for us. Jim, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Well, I think with use tax, I think last year was a peak year in a lot of the areas with the building use tax as well as a primary employer use tax. So it's been hard to keep pace with that this year, and then even the automobile use tax is down. I think that's just an outcome of the economy and the tightening and increase in rates. So as a result, we've been trailing with use tax all year long. Our sales tax has been what's carrying us and has started to pick up, obviously, now since Costco opened.
Some other challenges is really, you know, we've been talking about this for a while. Employment continues to be an issue for us. We're not seeing the same impact holistically across the organization, but we are still seeing challenges in terms of pay markets changing fast throughout the year. There was a really good article in the Denver Post that really talked about how government agencies were competing with each other. We're competing with the state government, we're competing with the federal government, we're now competing with private sector. That really highlighted the issues that governments were facing in terms of recruitment, retention, and compensation. And that continues to be an issue that we're really looking at. Obviously, when we get into that section, we'll have a more in-depth presentation. But those haven't gone away. There have been areas within the organization where we've seen improvement, but we're not seeing it across the organization. I mentioned earlier that we still have some vacancies in different departments, and specifically I talked about the planning department. I think you still have a couple of vacancies, Joni. And so that just impacts capacity to the points we were making earlier. And then inflation, again, was a big driver in this budget. And when Jim goes over the general fund budget, you'll see it. I believe the level 1 request were at about $2.4 million, which is significantly higher than anything we've ever seen in level 1, and that's the must-pay bills that we have to absorb, or we just stop doing something. Which just ties into maintaining, providing the resources we need to meet the rising demand for services across the organization. With the property tax uncertainty, and I'm going to ask Jim to talk about this one because we spent a fair amount of time today talking about it because we got some new information. But Jim, do you want to?
So, we approached this budget once we knew some information back in May about the increase in property valuations. We wanted to use a strategy, based on the fact that we knew HH was going to be on the ballot, and we were not sure what the impacts of HH would be on the assessed valuation for the city if and after it passes. So we read that it would be supposedly like lower the increases to people by 50%. So, the easy way to look at it is, well, maybe this number gets cut in 50%. Our increase back in May was based on the preliminary information that the assessor's office gave us was a 35.4% increase. So we looked at that and said, okay, well, let's assume that you're going to lose 50%, and you've got appeals as well that were going to be happening all summer long. So trying to figure out, well, what should we actually budget for the year? Our strategy was to only, and as Harold mentioned, in past budgets, as you recall, recent budgets in an assessment year, we have not used all of the growth in the property tax for ongoing in the first year so that we could also save some to use for ongoing in the second year. So we took a similar approach to this, assuming that we're not really going to know what's going to be available to the city until no earlier than the end of November, and maybe as late as even the end of December if HH passes. So that 35.4% increase was close to $8.4 million. We decided to only use $3.5 million on ongoing expenses in the general fund. And the sales tax growth in the general fund this year was very limited because, as we just mentioned, of the use tax. So we didn't have a lot of new sales tax to budget for this year. It was a little over $2 million. So the general fund was only looking at a combined tax increase for the budget of $5.5 million. And it was greater than that last year. I don't have that off the top of my head. So anyhow, the thing with the property taxes is we won't find out for a while about HH. And we also have these ballot questions that also are going to, if passed, levy a property tax. So there are definitely going to be some actions that the city council will have to take as we get to the point of knowing more about this. So we think that in November likely, and honestly, we'll be back in a few weeks, on the 19th actually, I've added this to the schedule on the 19th so that we can talk about this in more depth, and we need to have a little bit more time to strategize on how best to approach that. What we've done in the budget, as I mentioned, is 3.5 for ongoing, and then another 3.5 that we put in for one-time expense. So that we've only designated $500,000 of the 3.5 one-time expense. The rest would be to be designated, and that might be something that need to be in November as well, once we know, are we going to have it or not? That's been our strategy and approach through the budget process. And then last night, we finally received the preliminary, the official preliminary assessed valuations that are due to us in late August. So that a little bit too late to get, we did get it into the budget message, but not what to do with it. But what I was told over the summer is that the county has been pretty much denying about 75% of the appeals. So what we did is we got an updated assessed valuation, and it just about didn't change much. It went down $90,000 of property tax. So I don't know why. I haven't had it, didn't get on the phone to try to bother the county. I know they're real busy right now, and they had a hard time getting me that in the first place. But I will try to find out in the meantime what the case is there. But I would imagine there's been some appeals that probably were allowed, but maybe there was also some increased valuation that they still needed to recognize that they didn't have in May.
So, okay, let me ask a question really fast. Jim, can you give us your opinion on the impacts that Proposition HH would have on Tabor? Because that's a huge part of that proposition.
Well, Mayor Peck, no, I don't have a strong opinion about that, because the city has really debruced itself, so it's not going to be a major factor for Longmont, so I haven't really taken a big interest in that aspect of it. And I tried reading HH, and it's very long, and what I was looking for is try to figure out what we might be losing. And now that you bring that up, I did forget to say that I don't think it's going to have a 50% impact on the growth here in Longmont. My estimate would be at the most is about a third of that could be lost. And so that's part of why I was willing to begin to start to budget a little bit more than what we, than the $3.5 million that we're using for ongoing, is because I really don't think we're gonna lose that much from HH as compared to what, the 50% that we read about early on. So.
Okay.
So I think the point is uncertainty, uncertainty that we haven't seen, and we had to be conservative because we don't want to overestimate revenue and be on the other side of the equation.
Oh, thank you for that. So I do have a couple more questions if you have a minute. Councilor McCoy.
Thank you, Mayor. Earlier this summer, I had some complaints about some overtly aggressive professional signature collectors for a cap at 4% on property taxes that were out there collecting these signatures to bring it statewide to 4%. And I don't know if that ever got completed and that they got checked by, the Secretary of State or anything, but I don't know if that was, is going to show up on the ballot this year, if that's anything that you've considered.
Mayor Peck, there's been a lot of that discussed by my peers. I've seen information. What I've heard back is that none of those actually did make the state ballot this year. We might see it next year, I think, is what the last that I heard, but.
Okay. Councilor Waters.
Thanks, Mayor Peck. Real quick, Jim, just to clarify, the 35% increase would be a 35% increase in revenues generated by sales tax given the new assessed valuation.
Property.
I'm sorry, property tax based on the new assessed valuation. And so, looking at taking 50% of that based on the uncertainties. And then the last part of what you just said, I just want to make certain I understood, that after having looked at what the county assessor approved or granted in terms of appeals, that only took 90,000 off the 8.4 million, which was the 35% increase.
Yeah, so, and I don't,
Is that, did I follow it?
yeah, except that I don't know how, the outcome of appeals and how much of that changed that number. All I know is that the new number
Is
is only
$90,000 less.
90,000 less of property tax, not
Okay.
assessed
I
value,
just-
that's greater.
I just want to make sure.
But I don't know why, so.
Thanks.
So on that one, literally, I think it was last night when Jim sent me the email they're responding, it was one of those, we're scratching our head going, we need to understand this before we go too far. So we're going to get into some highlights. This budget, as you can see, the total operating budget for all funds, and I'm going to stress all funds. This is all the small funds, the water fund, the wastewater fund, is $444.53 million. As you can see, it's $31.4 million more than the 2023 adopted budget of 419, and that's a 7.61% increase over the 2023 budget. As I said earlier, we're required to provide you with a balanced budget, so this is balanced with sources of revenue in order to meet those expenses. This does include some rate increases that have already been adopted by the City Council, and that's going to be the 4% increase in water rates, the 12.9% increase in storm drainage, and the 9% increase in sewer rates. And again, that has already been adopted by council. We talk about this every year in how we look at our capital projects, and based on our budget, we have to build up fund balances in order to move forward with projects. So we are going to draw down about $28.3 million in those fund balances primarily to meet our capital needs. You can look at the bottom and see, some of those significant capital projects that we're going to be working on. Many of these we've talked to you about in the past, but I'm not going to go over these specifically, but you get a sense of some of the projects that we're having to draw down fund balance on. As Jim talked about earlier, I can breeze through this slide now. So we have a 2.23% increase in sales and use tax growth. That is 3.49% above 2023, and that is 4.48 million greater in 23, and it's 2.05 greater in the general fund. So again, to kind of clarify for the community, we have the open space, we have the transportation, and we have the public safety fund that also gets revenue out of that, and that's where you're seeing the difference. And then the $7 million that Jim talked about in terms of property tax, and the $3.5 million for one time and then ongoing. The general fund budget, which I think most people will really kind of focus on, is $121.3 million. That's an increase of 10.5% or $11 million. Our ongoing expenses in the general fund increased from 104.2 to 112. Again, on the 12th, is it the 12th, is when we're going to go over the general fund?
Yes.
We're going to dig into that in more depth. Our one-time expenses did increase to $8.4 million. A major portion of that one-time expense is a $3 million from property tax contingent on the outcome of Proposition HH. So we held it into a non-departmental account, awaiting to see what happens with that vote and what that number is going to look like. And then, as council knows, last year we started the take-home car program for police, and that's an additional $1.2 million that we're taking out of this. Not to kill other people's thunder when they present to you, we're still having problems getting cars and getting commitment dates. And so I wanted to say that, because we're still seeing supply chain impacts. It hasn't gone away. When we look at this in terms of other highlights, when we looked at the adjustment to the midpoint of the range, we're seeing a 4.64 increase to the midpoint of our range. As you know, when we talk about this, anytime we go through this, and we did do the Mercer study of which HR will talk about and what we were seeing, some employees are below the midpoint, some employees are ahead of the midpoint, and some are around the midpoint. So it is different for every individual, but the ranges did move 4.6%. If you think about that, we estimated last year that the ranges would move 6%, I believe. So you can see the pressures of competition for staffing and employment and what we're dealing with. We did negotiate a 3-year contract with our collective bargaining units in police and fire, and that's a 4% negotiated rate that we did a couple of years ago. And then, we're going to continue the open range employee at 101%. I know we've been telling council we want to move to 102. It seems like that last 1%, with the budget issues that we're dealing with, has just continued to be a thorn in our side. As always, we do allocate money for exceptional performance for our staff members, and we will have that available again this year. I think the question was asked earlier, so what does this mean? And what it really means for us is, since council set their priorities, this has been front and center in terms of what we're doing as an organization and how we're going to approach it and what we're looking at. So obviously, when we went into this budget process, this was something that we were working off of in terms of what we were looking at, what we needed to fund, and how we needed to fund it. Again, we've already had this in a previous presentation in terms of what's the council vision for people. To give you a sense of some of the things that we have in play in this category, you can see that we're continuing the CARES rebates. I mean, that increases on an annual basis based on expense, continuing early childhood and employee child care. One of the things that you're probably, we've been pretty aggressive in early childhood care in the previous budgets, and so we have some money available, so we were less aggressive in this one. We do have the $275,000 from the marijuana tax for mental health and addiction. We're going to have a special presentation on this because we want to talk to council about a different approach in terms of how we can maybe bring on some more mental health resources that can also assist with our housing authority and other challenges that we have. When we look at attainable housing fund, so we have $400,000 of one-time funding and $350,000 of ongoing funding for that attainable housing fund. What that's going to mean is, on an ongoing basis, we will have $600,000 ongoing, and so we'll have $1 million available next year, but $400,000 will be one time. Again, taking the same approach that we took on the affordable housing fund, incrementally stepping in to have $1 million on an annual basis. As we talked about earlier, we did increase the Human Service Agency funding from 2.25% to 3%. As the budget increases, so does that budget, and so you're seeing an additional $179,000. And then, based on our partnership with the I Have a Dream and council request, we're putting $40,000 into that program. Places. As you know, one of the goals that you had in transportation was, how do we look at a micro-transit program? So you're seeing about $648,000 within our transportation fund. There is a grant process that RTD opened up. We have applied for that grant to look at micro-transit. Hopefully we'll hear in the near future. And we think there's going to be a fair amount of conversations. You all did also hear, and this really relates to places and amenities, when you talked about the area of the river corridor from the Sugar Mill to the Boulder County Fairgrounds. And so you can see we put $400,000 in for that area to look at wetlands issues and updated studies. A lot of that's primarily related to the Sugar Mill project, but it's also related to the STEAM area as well in the First and Main Transit Center. Again, another $60,000 for plugged and abandoned well. We have $150,000 for completion of the roadway multimodal plan, and then another $150,000 one time to complete the update of the vision, or to complete the Vision Zero action plan. And then we had to put another 500,000 of one-time funding in the First and Main Transit project. And so you all approved the IGA with RTD as we're moving forward. Obviously purchasing property, that continues to increase. And so we needed another $500,000 to complete that process so we can move forward with it. And then you see $240,000 for the ice rink repair at Roosevelt. We're really at the point where this will allow us to make some adjustments and maybe carry it on a couple of years longer. Obviously, the vote that is before our community will dictate how we look at that in the future, but significant issues related to the current ice rink. In general, I'm not going to go over this in a lot of detail, but you can see the positions that we've added. We added 34 new FTE. I would call to your attention, when you look at the general fund, there's only 13 and a half that we've added to the general fund. So most of those positions are related to our other operating funds. I wanted to show you this. It's incredibly hard to read, but it's more of a context in terms of how we actually took the goal-setting document, and you're going to have this as part of the documents that we send to you. But what I really did is took the new positions and said, what does this do in terms of the goals that council set for us, and how is it going to impact the different areas? As we were doing this, one of the things that hit us pretty quickly is that when we look at these positions, it never was just hitting one thing. The positions that we were talking about were hitting multiple areas. Obviously, when we talk about core services being the primary function of the organization, that was a big piece of it. But, you know, when you look at the neighborhood resource officer, yep, that hits core services in our police department, but it also hits places and amenities because they also work with our rangers and dealing with some of the issues that we're seeing in open space and different areas of our community, and it does hit safety. And when you look at this, I'm going to call that position out because there was actually something we'll talk about in more depth. But the reason we were actually able to add the neighborhood resource officer is because through some restructuring, we were actually able to create a PIO officer. Out of the creation of the PIO officer, we were able to also create a neighborhood. So we fund one position, and we're able to get two more out of it when one's a neighborhood resource officer and another one is it's not on this sheet, but it'll be on another one. It's basically a position that will allow us to coordinate all of our enforcement work that we do, from code enforcement to parking control, our rangers, in a coordinated manner and interface within our public safety department. So we fund one position. Through restructuring, we can get two more, and it allows us to coordinate. Another one that I wanted to kind of bring to your attention, you see some that are very specific to core services as we look through this.
Harold, just real fast for the people who are listening, can you tell us what PIL stands for?
PIO, Public Information Officer.
Okay, thanks.
So when you look at some of these positions, you see some that are just pretty straightforward. And then you see others, like you wouldn't think of this. So we have a senior code enforcement officer. We know council's been talking about we need more proactive code enforcement. With the promotion of Dane, we also need another housing position. And so that new code enforcement officer actually will do the core work of code enforcement, hit the safety components of housing, and also the housing for all category because it's all interrelated. And then you have some where we have trying to find the parks positions. I can't find them. They're on here, but we had some parks positions that we funded. Well, we just needed to fund those positions because as we look at the 8 and 5 work that we're doing, we actually have to start building that operational capability so that we can maintain the parks when they're done. And then, you know, one of the things that I looked at is you're definitely going to see some positions that have been approved related to work with the youth of our community. And you'll see it connected to housing, and you're probably going, well, why does that have to connect to housing? One of the things that I've learned through the Housing Authority work is that if property managers are in the crime-free multifamily housing program, if you have somebody that commits a crime that is in that housing unit, no matter who it is, and we had to deal with it on the Housing Authority side, you're at risk of losing your housing because that violates the lease. So when we look at things like the Rewind program and the parenting program, yes, it's dealing with the immediate core issues that we have in front of us, but it also helps people maintain their housing because we know what the consequences are if that occurs. So you'll see it checking multiple boxes. But I wanted to give you a sense. What you will see is not only for the positions that we're adding, but every request that was funded, you will see the same kind of matrix in terms of what we're saying that it hits based on the council goals. We've also have done it to where we look at Envision Longmont because there is an overlay between Envision Longmont and the council goals. And then finally, other things that we had to look at. So council did direct that the full funding for Longmont Public Media come into place in this budget based on the franchise fees. That's about $115,000. Franchise fees did go down a little bit, so it wasn't as much as we talked about last year. The other thing, I know council's had some questions regarding the Humane Society. We did put money ongoing in level 1 for this. And you can see 575, that's in addition to the 150. So historically, the city's paid $150,000. They're requesting $700,000 to $800,000. Just to let you know, what we've said is we think we need to pay what really is the cost for the city. And that's the conversation we're in. I'm not going to negotiate that in public. Just we're in that conversation, and we have some data issues that we need to really resolve so that we can come to council and go, we think this is what the cost is. And so it's really surrounding data issues. And if you all have questions, Zach and I will be happy to talk to you about it, but know that there's an additional 575 that we put into the budget. But we need to look at some details. Looking ahead. Continued impacts of inflation and supply chain issues. I talked a little bit about cars. It seems like on a regular basis, just on our vehicles, about a month or so ago, 2 months ago, they just canceled our order of trucks. We can't get a date for our hybrid police cars. It just seems like it's a regular issue for us. When we look across our organization, everyone's struggling with this. I was in a housing conversation regarding the resyndication of Village Place, and we need a certain switchgear to work with our solar that we're looking at, and it's like 16 months to get it. And so it's just still in play. And I know the further we get away from COVID, I think people go, it's changing. It's not changing. And it may improve in this area, but it's not in this area. So that's continuing to hit us. As we talked about earlier, the 4% issue on the property tax, further efforts to reduce property tax assessment rates ultimately impacts our ongoing operations, and at the end of the day really impacts the services that we can provide to the city. What we can provide is directly related to the revenue that we receive. And then reductions to the sales tax base, we know that frankly Costco helped us. And we hope that we can do that, but you just never know what the next change in the retail world is going to be. And we're still hearing potential of recession. You still hear that when you look at, different economists. So those are all things that we're continuing to worry about as we look at the future. Jim?
Just a couple of things I think we should have, one I forgot to cover and one I should have probably also featured in here and forgot is that when you just mentioned that sales tax, that Costco was helped our sales tax, it kind of saved our sales tax. But the thing that you need to realize, when I said I have a little over $2 million of new sales tax in the general fund for next year, over $1 million of that, a little over $1 million of that is going to repay the loan that we made for the public improvements. So that kind of reduces the amount that's available for the rest of the general fund services. So that is happening in both the general fund and the public improvement fund, 1% rate sales tax being paid back. We'll know more in a few months, but the loan amount is going to be going down based on whatever we have left over from the project cost, and as well because this is being repaid at a little bit higher rate than what we first projected. But on the other hand, interest rates are also higher, so that also plays into all of this. And then the second thing that I want to take you back to the property tax, because what I forgot to point out is that with these ballot questions that we have, we are levying a property tax to pay for debt service or COP payments on the construction of those projects mostly. And on three of those, the three major projects, not the Y one, that one's just to raise a dollar amount. But, so the mill levy would go down because we're only trying to generate a certain amount of dollars to pay for the debt, which of course is to still be determined based on interest rates. But we used a conservative estimate of what the property tax would generate with a 1 mil. And so far, based on this information that we just received yesterday, obviously that's not going down like we projected. So the mill levy rate that we actually levy would go down. So, well, again, that's something hopefully we'll have a better handle on when we set that.
Councilor McCoy.
Thank you, Mayor Pick. So, Jim, about, we know that Costco helped us. Did it also somewhat hurt us over at Sam's Club? Do we know if there's a variation there?
So I'm going to say that, because there's only so much I can say about sales tax since it's confidential under our code as far as an individual business's sales
Okay.
tax, and I'd probably say you have too much information in here about Costco already. But so there were negative impacts in a number of areas that sell, so not just discount stores, but also groceries. But not nearly close to what we may have been projecting. And it's still early for me to make that statement, but so far looking to see what the declines have been. Some of them haven't even dropped, some have, and overall, it's been I think a large net to us. So I think, so then what that tells us is that obviously there's a lot of folks coming to Longmont who weren't coming to Longmont before to shop at Costco, as well as folks who were leaving town to shop at Costco. So that's definitely a large plus to us. I think I will say that they told us that they don't really consider themselves competitors with Sam's, and I think we're seeing that really to be the case.
Wow, okay, thank you.
So I think, you obviously weren't here when we talked about it. When we built the pro forma for that project, Jim included a cannibalization component, and so we were hedging down the revenue anyway, assuming that. And generally what he's saying is, at this point, we're not seeing the cannibalization approach even what we estimated.
Councilor Waters.
Thanks, Mayor Peck. Harold, you're going to need to bring your screen back up or your slide deck.
Oh, Sandy, what did I do?
Could you go to the staffing, those 2 pages where you were showing us where we're adding staff? I think it's slides 7 and 8, I think.
Yep.
Oh, it's 17 and 18 they are. This one's 17.
Yeah.
All right. Just specifically, I don't know, with the code here, 267, senior center programmer, those codes I assume are tied back to lines in the budget or what, yeah. So we're adding one FTE
Yes.
to the senior center, specifically to look at program development and execution.
Correct.
That's not a computer programmer, that's a program.
For the senior center.
But a program, somebody developing programs.
Correct,
All right.
yeah.
I just think that's important to acknowledge.
Well, and if I can answer that, that was originally coming in as a dual request with the Housing Authority, in evaluating it, we really felt that, you know, when we look at the age-restricted properties, that's one and the same, and it made more sense just to be a general fund contribution.
In 174, the Senior Center Friends transfer is really money generated by the Friends that you're transferring into the general fund to support
Correct.
costs associated with the senior center.
Correct.
Could you go to the next slide? I see at least 2 new FTE in Parks and Natural Resources.
There's several, actually, so we have, there's a
I'd
lot.
say, 3 at least. Well, go ahead, I'll be quiet, you talk.
Yeah, there's a lot that we're doing in there. So one of the things, talking about staffing, you know, so we have a position, and we really wanted to create a career series. So we're starting that process because that really helps us retain staffing.
Sure.
And we're funding, obviously, some other positions in natural resources. And then, in addition to that, we have the park staffing that's really related to the work that we have to get done.
What does that roll into in terms of numbers of FTE? Do you know that off the top of your head?
Joni, I want to say there was 4 in natural resources and 2 in parks, 2 or 3 in two
So
in
that's
parks.
a total of 6, 4
5 or
to
6.
additional personnel.
How many in parks? 3 in parks and 4 in natural resources, or 3 in natural?
Well, the ones in natural resources are just upgrades. Oh, sorry, 2 new ones in natural resources.
5.
2 new in natural resources and 3
3
in
in
parks.
parks.
I just want to say, good on you. I think we need that. This makes sense. You don't need to go back to it, but the $100,000 that you referred to for early childhood, is that an additional 100, or we're taking the total budget line back to 100,000?
I think that's maintaining the ongoing in that.
And so what we had the total this year was like 550. There were some of that was the DOLA grant.
Yes, and there's carryovers that we have in that as well. So when I said we had.
Here comes Christina. She's going to help answer that question.
Yeah.
Good evening, Mayor Peck. Wrong button. Good evening, Mayor Peck, members of council, Christina Pacheco, Human Services Director. This year in carryover, there was about $875,000. And the intent in using that is to support the Early Childhood Hub. We are already in conversation with community partners to talk about how that will work specifically to support our friend, family, neighbor care.
And does the 100,000, then we add that to the carryover, the 875?
That is ongoing.
That's ongoing dollars in. That is ongoing, that's a new ongoing, right?
Actually, it was new in '23, and so it's there again. I should have deleted that, but.
Yeah. So we basically held early
All
childhood.
right, we're budgeting at the same level going into.
Correct.
Well, that makes sense. We have been aggressive. I just wanted to clarify. Is this the only, right, you had a short list of CIP projects at the beginning of this presentation?
That was examples. At the next meeting, we're going to go into our CIP.
Okay, all right,
presentation.
that was the question. Is this the only look we're going to get?
No.
Then I'll save whatever other questions I have regarding CIP for the next meeting. And I think that's everything I was curious about. Thanks.
So Jim, I do have a question. In our sales tax total number, is the online sales tax included in that?
Yes, it's always included, so, I mean,
Okay.
I can cover, actually, it's in the monthly report every
Yeah,
month, how
it
much
is.
it is, but it's all part of that total, yes.
Okay, thank you.
So continuing kind of the look at the council goals and priority, so next meeting, we actually start the in-depth presentations. That is going to be the capital improvement projects. This one's going to be a little bit different because I'm also asking them to update projects that we've been accumulating money for, that we're going to start in '24, and so you're going to get some added information because it really impacts how much we're putting into capital now and what we can have. Obviously, inflation again has been a challenge for us. You all recently approved a loan from the golf fund to the fleet fund so we could build things, and so you're seeing that Also in the capital improvement process, when we were going into this year's budget prep, one of the things I said to everyone is don't put anything new if you haven't finished what's on your plate. And so that really let us kind of condense it because we've got to finish things. And in the budget, you'll see a project management office. I probably should have highlighted that. We have been working with strategic integration to create a project management department. When we use that concept, we know that on budget and on time tends to be something that happens with the work we're doing. We're going to start accelerating that and creating some dashboards to really focus in on our projects. And that's part of what council talked about in terms of our capital program. In addition to the capital program, the first two presentations you're actually going to be getting, one's going to be on the transportation fund to talk about what we're doing with Vision Zero and transportation, and then the second one's going to be on the affordable housing fund. As I've mentioned to you all, capacity is an issue for us. Leveraging additional state dollars where there's millions of dollars in play, we're going to talk to you all about adjusting the administrative cap on that. And so the first day of the budget process is really going to be focused on capital and two of your biggest priorities that you set for us in '23. Any more questions?
I don't see anyone in the queue. So it looks like not.
Thank you, and we've been going through a couple of months of madness, and now it's our turn to hand that over to you all, and we look forward to going through the process. Hopefully, we presented a budget that hit your goals and objectives.
I want to thank you for the way you presented it. It's much clearer than when I first got on council, so I appreciate that. Do we need a break up here? All right, a 5-minute break.
We need a break.
Okay, I've been told our 5 minutes is up. I cannot get this back. Oh. But that's okay. On my microphone, electric rate study and rate proposals.
Good evening, Mayor Peck and members of council. I'm Raven Martin with Strategic Integration. Tonight I will be presenting information about the electric rate study and proposed 2-year rate schedule. In this presentation, I will describe economic pressures that are driving the need for these rate studies, staff recommendations for this 2-year rate study, residential bill impacts and assistance programs, community outreach, and at the end, we can answer any questions you have. Rate studies are precipitated by periodic reviews of the financial status of the utilities, as well as increased costs from various factors which affect the city's ability to continue to provide essential services to the community. First, we determine what the revenue requirement is, which is the funding needed to deliver the programs and services that have been approved by council to serve this community. That revenue requirement is typically split between operating expenses, capital expenses, and for electric purchased power. Once we know what the total revenue requirement is, we allocate those costs among the customer classes. The cost of service analysis ensures that we have equity among various customer classes so that each customer class is paying their fair share and not paying for the cost of providing service to a different customer class. Through this electric rate study, several factors affecting the revenue requirement are purchase power, inflation, and capital improvement program projects. The City of Longmont purchases the vast majority of power from Platte River Power Authority, and PRPA is proposing a wholesale energy rate increase of 5% each year over the next 2 years. These increases are to fund PRPA's efforts to meet the city's 2030 renewable energy goal. Additionally, inflation is increasing the cost of contractor, labor, and material expenses. There is also an increase to CIP projects in order to maintain the city's aging infrastructure. This slide shows the amount of additional revenue requirement that is needed in 2024 over 2023's budget, as well as 2025 over 2024. This slide shows the revenue requirement as a comparison between what the city will generate in revenue with current rates versus the revenue requirement for 2024 and 2025. Here, the revenue requirement for 2024 is broken down by expense category, with 65% or 64% of the revenue requirement for purchased power, 27% for operating expenses, and 9% for CIP projects. The wholesale energy rate increase proposed by PRPA funds the cost of building the infrastructure needed to achieve the city's renewable energy goals. The most recent survey of regional wholesale rate providers shows that PRPA's average wholesale rate is the lowest. This low rate allows owner communities such as Longmont to offer competitive energy rates. Staff is proposing a 2-year rate schedule in which all classes of service will see a 6.8% increase each year beginning in 2024 to cover the revenue requirement. The amounts for each class of service are shown in the table. I'd like to point out that there is no change to the rate structure, and the monthly service charge is not being increased, so the revenue requirement is being met entirely through the updated usage rates. This allows customers to have more control over their bill through their electric usage. This table represents the amounts for each year of the proposed rate schedule for an average residential usage for the services that they would see on their bill for electric, water, wastewater, storm drainage, waste services, and park and greenway. Staff also looked at the average residential utility bills of neighboring communities. This table shows the 2023 rates for these communities compared to the 2024 proposed rate schedule. We understand that some communities are also undergoing rate studies as well, with proposed rate increases in 2024. But in comparison to the 2023 published rates, Longmont offers competitive rates among those neighboring communities surveyed. The City of Longmont offers residents opportunities to lower their bills using energy and water more efficient. Programs such as Efficiency Works assist homeowners and businesses in identifying options for efficiency upgrades, as well as rebates and discounts available for more efficient appliance solutions. LPC is participant of Colorado's Affordable Residential Energy Program, or CARE, which is available to income-qualified residents and provides free home energy audits, energy efficiency upgrades to reduce energy usage, and makes homes more comfortable. Several partner agencies are able to provide assistance each year for utility payments, including federal assistance for heating costs through LEAP or crisis assistance through the Hour Center. Residents may also qualify for the Income Qualified Assistance Program, Longmont City Assistance and Rebate System, or Longmont CARES. We want to stress that we are sensitive to the community's needs and how rate changes affect the community. Longmont CARES is income qualified and offers rebates for water, grocery sales tax, property tax and rent, park and greenway maintenance fee, and electricity. Staff proposes increasing the monthly rebate for Longmont CARES for those who qualify for this program for their monthly rebate to $15.50 in 2024 and $20.75 in 2025. In 2024, this will cover 97% of the average residential's customer monthly increase, and in 2025, it will cover 93%. There are a number of opportunities available to engage the public around utility bills. Several recent community events have highlighted the information in utility bills and the opportunities to save money. In 2020, the Sustainable Business Program hosted a webinar for businesses on reading commercial utility bills, which included money-saving tips. In 2021, they hosted a webinar entitled How to Read and Reduce Your Household Utility Bill, provided similar information for residential bills as well. Messaging is broadcast through a variety of city channels as well, including CityLine, City Talk, Nextlight's More Power to You blog, social media, and the city's website, and outreach activities during community events. And information regarding potential rate changes will be available in English and Spanish on a city webpage, as well as throughout the citywide locations that have high contact with residents. Proposed ordinances are anticipated to be presented to council in September. Additionally, staff plans to present an analysis of self-generation rates at the beginning of 2024. At this time, staff is asking council for direction on whether to prepare an ordinance to amend electric rates for 2024 and 2025, and direction on preparing an ordinance to amend Longmont CARES rebate.
Thank you, Raven. Is there any discussion from counselors on this? I have a couple of questions. I don't see anyone else in the queue. First of all, can you tell us what CIP projects the increased rates will cover?
Thank you for your question, Mayor Peck. This slide does have a list of the CIP projects which are going to be funded for 2024.
Are any of these projects related to our 100% renewable? Will they get us there? This is part of our program.
Mayor Peck, members of council, my name is Brian McGill. I'm the Utility Rate and Analysis Manager for Strategic Integration. And yes, there are projects on here that are designed to help us reach that 100% renewable goal. In specific, there's the grid modernization project, and then also it's ELE 103, the Distributed Energy Resources Innovation Solutions project. And then also there's a portion in 102 that helps us to also update the grid to be able to help us reach that 100% goal.
Great, thank you. What happens, and I'm asking this because we're going to be asked, what happens if we don't increase this year, this coming year, 2024? If we wait a couple of years to do this?
So I can actually jump into this one. I had the city managers of Fort Collins, Loveland, Estes Park, and obviously Longmont. We had a conversation with PRPA, and so they are finalizing the roadmap that it really lays out the work that we have to do as local communities to ensure that we're ready, so that when we do hit that point, we can transition into it. And so what you will see is, in addition to the work that we have to do, so when I talk to Daryl and David, you know, obviously there's work that we have to do in our substations. We have to really make sure that we're working on the quality of the infrastructure and replacing infrastructure where we need to handle that traffic. There's other projects. So something we've been working on is AMI, CIS, the MDM. All of those issues have to be in play, in addition to a really robust and strong infrastructure, so that when we hit that time period, we can transition into it. And if we delay it, you know, what that does is, and this was part of the conversation, is making sure that all 4 cities were on the same page, so that what one city does doesn't negatively impact all 4 cities.
Great, I'm so glad you're meeting with the other city managers on this. And I just want to say to the public that we do want to transition. It is what the city wants, it's the council direction, and it's expensive. And there's so much competition around the country that the demand is raising the rates as well. So thank you for hanging in there with us. Thank you. Is there any other discussion? Can I have a couple of motions then? Councilor Martin.
I'll make the motions in a second, but I do have a couple of questions. Just, they're really clarifications. Most of the rate increases that increase in PRPA's wholesale rates, correct? Because I'm not sure that that was clear. The other thing that I think is that almost all of these are in support of the 2030 goal and beneficial electrification in support of the sustainability goals. So that would be feeder underground conversion, system capacity increases, both substation work, electric grid modification. You could probably decide, you know, streetlights is but it's probably going to be using LED streetlights, right? Which is a huge energy savings. So they're all in support of the 2030 goals. And that's why this is such a nice list of capital investments. So I just want to do it, and I definitely move support of the new rate structure.
If I can add really quick, we're going to have a more in-depth presentation as part of our CIP connecting
Okay.
the 100% renewable goal. That was one of the unusual ones where we haven't done it before, is connecting everything in our CIP presentation next week.
Okay, do I have a second? So this has been moved by, I'm sorry, which one did you move? The first one?
First one only. I didn't want to do them two at once.
Okay, and I can't repeat that because it's not on the screen. I can't remember what that was.
Oh, the rate increase.
Okay, so Councilor Martin made a motion to prepare an ordinance to amend the electric rates for 2024 and 25, and that was seconded by Councilor Waters. I see no discussion, so let's vote. Counselor Hidalgo Faring.
So if we are ready, I would like to move to pass, to prepare an ordinance to amend the Longmont CARES rebate as we're looking to, oh, what's that?
I didn't read the result yet.
Oh, sorry.
The first ordinance, the first motion to amend the electric rates passed unanimously. Counselor Hidalgo Faring, do you want to make a motion?
Now I will. Okay, so I make a motion to prepare an ordinance to amend the Longmont CARES rebate. I think if we're looking to increase the rates, we also need to help support those who can't make those payments.
Okay. So the second ordinance for the CARES rebate was made by Counselor Hidalgo Faring, seconded by Counselor McCoy. Seeing no discussion, let's vote. That passes unanimously. Thank you, Raven. Thank you. So that ends our study session items. We are now ready for mayor and council comments. Councilor Waters.
Thanks, Mayor Peck. I'm going to apologize for promoting people take time to watch a video because I was part of it, and that's what I'm going to apologize for, because I wouldn't typically promote something that I've been involved with. But last night I interviewed the executive director of Rise Against Suicide and one of her board members in one of my backstory programs, which my wife and I watch. I don't know that anybody else in town watches those. The only reason I mention this is that the second leading cause of death among kids in America today is suicide. One of the data points that was shared last night is that in the last 12 months, Rise Against Suicide, which is only really touching a fraction of the number of kids who need this, covered the cost of therapy for 167 kids in Longmont. 350 kids or so countywide, but of those 350, 167 Longmonters. The two women who were being interviewed probably did the best job of modeling what a conversation looks like between adults and children who are concerned about them and their future and their safety that I've ever seen. And the people who there were some people who watched who have fed that back to me as well. My concern is it's going to be the most important conversation that nobody ever hears or watches. But I have to say that if anybody has time to take 50 minutes, just block me out. Just listen to these two individuals talk about how important it is and model what it looks like, because it's a life-changing conversation. So if you want anybody curious, you could just click on Longmont Public Media. It's the backstory on Rise Against Suicide, and I wouldn't promote it except that it is such an important conversation, and it is God, it's such a crisis here and across the country. Thanks.
Thank you for that. And when we have the conversation, Harold, about the dollars in the mental health, we might consider how we can help with that. Councilor Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. This feels kind of trivial after that, but having a strong community is part of the support system, even for our most at-risk children, so I don't feel too guilty. For reminding everybody that our favorite street fair, Unity in the Community, got rained out last Friday. It has now been firmly rescheduled for Friday, October 6th. So just everybody readjust your schedules, turn out, Unity in the Community, Friday, October 6th. Same time, same place.
Great. Thank you. Are there any other comments? Seeing none, can I have a motion to, whoops, I'm sorry. How could I forget you two? So, city manager remarks.
No comments, Mayor, Council.
City attorney.
No comments, Mayor.
Now can I have a motion to adjourn? Thank you. Thank you. Moved by Counselor McCoy, seconded by Counselor Martin. All those in favor say aye. All those, I don't even want to ask this. All those opposed? Yay, we're adjourned.